All right, my name is Dan, and I've been looking forward to doing this video for a while. Now, when we get into books, a lot of people approach it differently. Some people are looking more for sort of an action kind of popcorn flick that they can get into quick and just leave it behind. Maybe something more like a Marvel movie or Star Wars or something like that, even though, you know, there's a lot with both of those franchises. But sometimes people don't really need so much action or so much to actually happen, and they just like being in that world. When I think of that with my spouse, there's The Office. A lot of people will go through that. They'll finish the last episode and they'll just restart it and keep going. I know Seinfeld is that for a lot of people. For me, Star Trek is that. Sometimes I just like being there, and even if nothing really happens, it's just the characters and it's just the things that we're reading. It's just a comfort food. So here I have some comfort food books that I would like to share, which kind of might I don't know if all of these will be, I'm sure this list will be different than a lot of people's, especially if they are coming at it from maybe a fantasy point of view. But these are my comfort food books, and there's a lot of them, and they're from all sorts of different genres. So I'll go through these and explain maybe why they are my comfort food books. Now, the first ones aren't necessarily specific books, but more that they are historical nonfiction. That is really my main comfort food that I have had for the last decades. That's just what I have always gone to. I've sprinkled in fiction and things like that, but often with fiction, I would buy the book right before the movie was coming out and think I got to read the book first. And then I would end up not reading the book and then not going to see the movie. So there's all these movies that I haven't seen because I haven't read the book yet. But I've been remedying that for the last few years and whatnot, and really expanding my breadth of the scope of what types of things I like to read. But an example of something, this Rats book, something I haven't read yet. It's of all these rats in Manhattan. I thought that would be interesting. I can go into any of these kind of history books or historical nonfiction that. And I know that I will just be interested. Another one, Carthage Must Be Destroyed. That is something I have read more than once. I love the Phoenicians. I just love ancient history. And with history, for me, the reason why I think I love it so much is, even though it can be a slog for a lot of people, when I look at history, the reason why it used to be kind of boring for me is I would hear all these different kind of people, Alexander the Great and Abraham Lincoln. When I was younger, I didn't know where to place them. All these different characters in our history and all these events, and I didn't know where to add them on the timeline. And I wish I had it here, but there was a history textbook, a Western civilization textbook, that really changed everything for me. And when I want to get more sorts of things to look into and be interested in, I will go to that history textbook. And it's just like a launch point to different little areas. But like I was saying, I got that big kind of foundation of generally how our history has flowed. And now when I just go into any little specific event or person or kingdom or whatever, I very rarely find it to be boring. It's just my comfort food. All right, next thing. The complete tales of Edgar Allan Poe. When I was younger, I did speech, and we had this festival in town, so I would learn poems or short scenes and things like that, and I would perform them. And one of the things that I ended up really kind of getting towards as I got older, I would go away from sort of the Huckleberry Finn and making people laugh, soup what was the anyway? And I got more into Edgar Allan Poe, and that's when I got really into short stories. Some standouts from Edgar Allan Poe is The Pit and the Pendulum. That's probably the one that I think about the most. The Telltale Heart, and I just love Edgar Allan Poe. I've tried Shakespeare more as I get older, and I can't really connect with a lot of those stories because of the writing. It just kind of goes over me. Except for Macbeth, I really love. I think that's probably my favorite. But the short stories of Edgar Allan Poe are my favorite and really have inspired me in a lot of ways to write, because I think if you can write a good short story and kind of keep that way of grabbing people's attention and not having wasted space in a novel form, that's awesome. So I really owe a lot to Edgar Allan Poe, and that is one of my comfort foods. It won't be for everyone, obviously. Another one that probably won't be for everyone is Moby Dick. Moby Dick, I love this book because of, not only is it a classic, but I love some of the themes that it goes over. And a lot of people think, there's just so much about sailing and whaling, and sometimes there's just not a lot going on. But I have a pretty high tolerance for not a lot going on and people musing on thinking about things that are internal, and I just like that kind of experience in a book. Now, I've come to find that I like stuff happening in my books, but it hasn't always been that way. I have a pretty high tolerance for just not a lot going on, and it is one of the great books in the English language, for sure. All right, let's get into some stuff that maybe is more modern and have surprised me recently and started to kind of change my tastes in books. First one is going to be Project Hail Mary. This one came out of left field a little bit for me. I really, 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 really adore this book. I can go back to this book, and sure, it doesn't have the same impact as it did the first time, because there is something that happens that I didn't really expect. And if you would like to read this book, I would say probably don't go to spoilers or don't go to reviews, because people really spoil things. And I was lucky that I didn't go to any reviews first, and I went in totally blind. I could go back to this book over and over and over. And I've suggested this book to so many people, and some people have come back and they generally say I really loved it. So that's my next one. Let's go to John Gwynne and Faithful and the Fallen. Now, I'm holding up Valor because I've lent Malice to another person who's reading that right now. I really like John Gwynne's writing. There are some things that, some technical things that I think, man, I wish he would have done this or this. He trims the fat when I sometimes wish he would just stay with something. But in terms of comfort food and just kind of getting in a quick chapter, the chapters are really short, so you can get in a chapter or two, but I promise you, you probably won't sit without doing 4 or 5 chapters at a time. That's just how quick pace this goes and how engaging it is. I just like being in The Faithful and the Fallen, and I haven't read the other series yet. After reading Valor, I went and I got everything that was available. Now, also, I know people really love Wrath and Ruin in the last 2 books. I love them too, but I'm a little bit more of a context person, and I like the front end parts of books. The parts of the books where people usually say, oh, you got to read the first 2 books to get into it, or you got to read the first 500 pages. Those are kind of the pages that I really tend to enjoy those slow moments. And there is a lot of great slow moments in between some of the great action and things. And few times has an author really grabbed my heart and squished it between their cold hands as John Gwynne has done. I can't wait to get back to this series. I can't wait to get to his other books. It is just comfort food for me. I really love it. Another one is Robin Hobb. I've only read this one, the first one. I have this first trilogy. I was blown away. I couldn't believe it took me this long to read Robin Hobb. One of the books that were these were in my TBR for a long time. I loved this first book with Finn. I could just spend so much time with this guy. And as soon as I'm done some of these other series that I'm in, namely Malazan, that's one of the next ones that I'm looking forward to really getting to. I think it's fantastic. Now, this next series is one of my very favorite series. And I don't know how many it would be for other people. And a lot of people don't even know that this is a series. If you are looking for a series, though, if you're someone who is interested in names having importance, then this might appeal to you. I like when names really mean something. I like themes that are just further than just beneath the surface. Anyway, I'll talk more about it. It's The Giver. The Giver. And I read The Giver when I was a kid. I was blown away by it, and I really loved it. I didn't know that it is a quartet. There is The Giver, which I think everyone should read that, and I'm sure a lot of people have. There is Gathering Blue, which takes place kind of elsewhere from where The Giver was, but kind of is related, and you can kind of start to see that as it goes on. I really love the main character in this. It has a different sort of... These are kind of dystopian novels, and it has a different sort of flavor that kind of echoes the one from The Giver. And then Messenger, which kind of starts to sort of tie things together, and then Sun. That is a series which, more than almost anything, really small books, is just comfort food for me. I like that it really hits me for some reason, each of these books. And very easy reading. I just really love this series, and I try to get more people to read it, even though it probably isn't for everyone, but I just really connect with this series. Another one I can always go to is Animal Farm from George Orwell. 1984, like that as well, but it is Animal Farm that I think, if I just want something small, if I'm going to go on an airplane and just need something to breeze through, that's an easy one for me as well. Now, Memories of Ice, I have found in kind of getting more involved with the fantasy community and finding a lot of people who really jive with kind of my tastes in fantasy. I haven't... There's been a lot of misses for me, but this is becoming my favorite series. And if you're watching this video, it's probably your favorite series or one of your favorites as well. There's not a wasted scene in this series for me. And I have soon found, like I said before, I actually like stuff happening. Yes, I like the quiet moments, but holy smokes, I sure like this Malazan series for both its quiet themes and for the excitement that happens within that series. It is a comfort food series for me. I can't wait to just keep going through them. Another one. This is another sci-fi one. So now, sometimes sci-fi is more lasers and spaceships and excitement and all these different races that look like Klingons or talking spiders that have a web of consciousness sort of thing. This one is maybe my favorite science fiction book Rendezvous with Rama by Arthur C. Clarke. And it's not because it's fast and exciting and wild. Sometimes science fiction is more about the quiet. Think of the start of Alien, and there's the blinking kind of monitor. Sometimes science fiction is more about the situation. This is really not about the characters at all, as it is about this situation. If you want to know what it is, think of a spaceship, or not a spaceship, but there's something going on in the near future. They see this object going through space, kind of spinning like a football. I think about 50 kilometers in length, and they wonder what it is out there. It clearly isn't natural. It looks like it's been created, and they are going to send someone out, or this pod with 6 or 7 people out to land on this object and see what it is and what is inside it. Now, I love this book because this is the one where I can go to over and over and over, but certainly on your first try or your first time through it, it makes you close your eyes and just imagine what they are also seeing. And it just kind of enchants me, if that's a good word for it. I love this book. Yes, it is very sciencey jargon, but it doesn't throw it in your face as much as some other really science-heavy books. It's very much, the people that do understand the jargon in this book, the characters, you just trust that they understand it, and it's not really important that you understand all the mumbo-jumbo part of it. It's this situation that I think is just, I love it. I love it so much. The next one, Lonesome Dove. This one is one of the greatest books I've ever read. It is one that I have. It's about this group of cattle herders, and in the Old West, and they are on their way from Texas to Montana, and I've taken that road a couple times. I live just north of there in Canada, and so I've taken that road. It would be a long road. This is one of those things where I read it very quickly the first time, and all the characters stuck with me. It's a comfort food, and that I would like to go through many, many, many more times in the future. And it's heavy. It's heavy. There are some hard things that they go through. And if you like kind of allowing yourself to go through hard things with characters that you love, I know, Faithful and the Fallen hits some of those notes. Some of these other ones kind of hit some of those notes. If you are okay with that, I think it will hit you. If you are okay with kind of being hit emotionally in some of these books, emotional highs and lows. The next one, Don Quixote, is one where I often tell people to wake up in the morning and just read one chapter, which is usually only a few pages of Don Quixote. More than almost anything else, this is the book that makes me laugh out loud to myself, but also is the character that is almost like my little spirit animal character. You root for him. You think he's being foolish sometimes. Sometimes you think, man, maybe he's onto something and everyone isn't. And other times you think, man, he just doesn't get it. You root for his little adventures. This is a man, if you don't know what that is, a man who's been reading King Arthur sort of stories for a long time and is really kind of enraptured. Is that a word? He's really into these stories, and he wants to kind of become one of these knights. And so he goes out on this quest. I think you will know in the first 20 pages if this works for you, because I think you will laugh right away if you read this, and I think you will be interested. But it is one that I don't think you should read quickly, but just in bite sizes every day. People call it the ultimate mirror, where you kind of see yourself in this book, and I tend to agree with that. But do it slowly. You don't need to rush through it. I think it's something that you want to really digest and to enjoy. And it's one of my favorite books it's a comfort food for me. Absolutely. My next one is perhaps one of my favorite books. I often say it's my favorite book. That changes about every day, but it's always in my top 3. And that is The Count of Monte Cristo. The Count of Monte Cristo is a big book. And if you only know the movie one of many movies or the BBC versions of the they have a TV versions, I think you do yourself a disfavor or a disservice by not going to the novel. I read the novel first and went to the book, and I know a lot of people read the novel first and then went to the movies, and I hated it because of how much I loved the book. Now, if it's fine if you love the movies, but just know that the resolution in the book is much more nuanced. It's much more, they call this tale the best revenge tale, and it's just not captured in the movies. It just isn't. It's much sweeter. This is one of those books where I think at least read the first 230 pages, and I think you will like that. And if you are not hooked at that point, I don't know if you are going to be, but the first 230 pages is one of probably my favorite couple hundred pages in literature. And one of the reasons also why this book is so great is in the movies, they kind of have to wrap up or get some of the best parts of a lot of these characters and kind of put 3 or 4 characters into one. So some of the reason why you like some of the characters from the movie is kind of split in a few different characters, and they don't even have some of my favorite people. It's a big cast. It is fantastic. One of my very, very, very favorite books, and certainly a comfort food book for me, if not my top one. Next one is a children's book, and it is The Whipping Boy. Really small. The Whipping Boy is something that hits home for me. Another one would be like The Indian in the Cupboard, another one. But The Whipping Boy is probably my favorite children's book. We have this Prince Brat who is a brat, and whenever he gets in trouble, they bring in the Whipping Boy to take the lashings for this brat, Prince Brat. And there is this interesting kind of mix that sneaks up on you. You kind of know where it's going and what the theme is going to be and what the lesson is going to be from the start. But even then, it still hits me. It still hits me whenever I go through it. I just love it. Very much not the Count of Monte Cristo. But I don't ever need everything to be over 1,000 pages. All right. I don't know why I put this in my comfort food books, but some of the things that I like is I have all of these are going to be more Gothic or Victorian horror sort of stuff. There's more that I could have added, but that is very much my comfort food. If you haven't noticed, stuff from the 1800s is my comfort food. I just really like how heavy people were on themes in those books. But one of the books that really is almost an anti-comfort book, but in that way it is a comfort book, and it won't be for everyone. It's one of the only books that scared the heck out of me when I read it, and I've only read it once because I'm scared to go back to it. It is Melmoth the Wanderer. I'm not going to suggest everyone read it because it is spooky as heck. Think of when someone's about to die or some bad thing's going to happen. This Melmoth almost shows up, and he's found just laughing and kind of haunting people. There's this picture that they look at, and they're just haunted by it. This one individual especially. There's a lot that happens in that book, but there's something that just grips me by it. Now, that is not a comfort thing that I can just read and soak myself into, but every time I get to it, I'm just engrossed by it. Won't be for everyone, though. These last ones are all kind of the same sort of category for me. The Woman in White, Wuthering Heights, Dr. Jekyll and The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, the picture of Dorian Gray, and the last two are ones that I really want to talk to, because even though those ones that I just mentioned are comfort food for me, kind of that they have the right tone that I like in a lot of books, it's these last books that have really made the most impact for me, especially the second one here. Now, the first one is going to be Dracula. This one is another one that is in my top 5 favorite books of all time. I wish I could have read it in the 1800s, not having known who Dracula is. But even then, I love looking at this with fresh eyes and trying to kind of piece this together through the characters that we get here. I have a lot of favorite characters that I love from this series. You might know Dracula already. If you haven't read the actual book, I think you should. One of my favorites. Now, this last book has the character that I think about more than any other character in books, in TV, in movies. This is the character that I am most obsessed with. This is also the character that I wish I could get. I just don't love the other adaptations. I love Mary Shelley's writing of it, but if I could write something, I would want to write for this character, because I love this character. He's my favorite character in anything, and that is Frankenstein's monster. But this is Frankenstein. Now, you might know Frankenstein from a lot of things, but if you haven't read the book, you don't know Frankenstein. I'm just going to say it plainly like that. He is different than what you get in the Universal pictures. I think this is one that could be analyzed over and over again. I would love to do a breakdown, much in the way that I am doing that for Malazan currently. This is one of my favorite books. I think it is deep, and I often think about Frankenstein, for better or worse. I love that character. I tried to get into what he could be thinking and his experience. I think of what happens at the end of this book, just following, and what a sequel would look like. I'll just leave that there. Now, I love all these books. What books are comfort food books for you? These aren't necessarily all my favorite books. I've had many books that have just blown me away from sci-fi. I know some of these Brandon Sanderson books have blown me away, even though they're not comfort food books for me. I would love to hear what are yours. And did any of these make your list? I am loving finding new books. So if there are some for you, I would love to bump them up on my TBR. I know lots of these aren't fantasy, and a lot of the people here would be fantasy readers. But, this is my list, and I'm sticking to it. And do any of these are any of these ones that you would consider to read yourself. And I'll just leave that there. Thank you very much. Leave a like if you've made it this far. It does help. And leave a comment. I like to engage with people as they feel comfortable doing that. I know I sometimes don't leave comments on videos, but just kind of anonymously go through them. But thank you if you've left comments and gotten to know me a little bit. It's been fun to see who's been watching. So thanks, and I will see you on the next video, which will probably be more House of Chains.